Matt Wiebe's world. You can read his work at Sportsnet.ca covering the Winnipeg Jets and the NHL with us on WST. Been a fun week around the Iceplex, or the Hockey for All Center. Listen, I mean, we could just talk about the great personalities of these young guys, and it's been fun. I think fans have really gotten into it. But let me ask you, I mean, from your perspective, you've been there throughout the week. What has stood out to you from watching all these players, not just the first rounders that are maybe getting a little bit more of the time in the chat room?
Yeah, Hassan, honestly, I think that the most valuable thing for the Winnipeg Jets organization is happening in the walkway between two of the rinks, quite frankly. And, what's happening on the ice will make no impact on whether a player or not makes the team in the fall. There aren't a lot of players on the ice that are even in contention for a roster spot, to be quite frank. However, the number of pictures and selfies that Colby Barlow, Rutger McGroarty, and a number of other players have been signing or standing around for, not begrudgingly, with massive $1 million smiles draped across their faces, is valuable. And not just for public perception, which we know is important for the organization. These guys are making lifelong fans before they've even played a single game with the Winnipeg Jets. And it's genuine. These guys aren't just posing with fake smiles and shaking hands and kissing babies. These guys are magnetic personalities who are actually happy to be in this situation and are proud to wear the logo, Huss. And for any team, that's important. For a Jets team trying to change the narrative, it's absolutely essential. We know they haven't had a camp like this since 2019. There is a palpable enthusiasm about the next wave of player that is coming into the organization, and for good reason. We saw it and we've talked about it. I mean, I don't think it's an accident that Barlow and McGroarty walked out to the first session together. You've seen them on social media. We've seen them interacting with fans.
I think they're taking over the Jets Insta this afternoon.
I think they are today,
So
yes.
All of you folks that can't get enough of those two young first rounders, get on Instagram this afternoon and see what they're going to be serving up on the gram.
Yeah, and Huss, I mean, I was standing in the periphery and I saw a kid's face after Colby signed his hat. And I'm telling you, this is something that stays with a person for their entire lifetime, Huss. You and I mean, it was a long time ago for many, including you and I. There were times when we hung around the Winnipeg Arena, in the bowels of the arena, just hoping for someone to sign your program or something of that nature. And those things stick with you for a long, long time. And for me, I've been incredibly impressed by the ability and, the willingness for those guys to put in that effort. I love the way the families are interacting. There's some families here who had a chance to, Mike McIntyre and I were both speaking with Zach Naring's mother and grandparents and sister today, down from Minot. They literally still cannot wipe the smiles off their faces from what they are able to enjoy in Nashville, and the pride that the family is taking in Zach joining this organization. It's incredible. And Huss, I mean, Naring was the star of the scrimmage today. Had two absolute snipes, at least two that I saw. And one of them was an incredible rush. This guy's a great skater. Of course, he needs to grow into his body. He's going to play in the USHL next year for the Sioux Falls Stampede. And then he's committed to going to Western Michigan University. But it's impressive. And, the other thing too, you and I were sitting there this morning watching the defensemen, and it was a pretty empty rink on that side because most guys were watching the first rounders on the other side. Elias Solomonson, he looks like a future NHLer, and anyone who was standing around with me,
say he's a ball player.
Yeah, well, Rutger would say he's a ball player. There's no doubt. Rutger was nowhere near that ice sheet. He's a ball player. Yeah. The guy skates like the wind. He's about 6'2". He's going to need to fill into his frame a little bit. He's, but this is a guy. It's funny, Huss. This is also like deep woods. When I covered the Moose, we were in Grand Rapids in the spring, I went and watched the West Michigan Whitecaps play high A ball, and Cameron Maben was on the Tigers. He was, I think, one of the top 3 prospects for Baseball America. The way he ran to first base was different than any other player on the field. Now that sounds absurd, but it's these are the things you have to look for. I mean, Solomonson is going to play one more year with Skellefteå in the Swedish Hockey League, but then I expect him to come over, and might he need some time with the Moose, of course. I mean, we'll see how he develops, but he's one of, if not the best Jets defense prospect in the system, and he's been impressive to watch. I was not there yesterday. I know he did some interviews. I know he spoke with some members of the media, but I mean, this is a guy who's going to be fun to watch for a long, long time. Dmitry, I don't know if it's Kniazev or not, but he actually spoke some pretty good English. He spoke today to the reporters. I wasn't in the scrums, but listened to him. He's eager and excited to showcase his offensive abilities, and he'll be with the Manitoba Moose. But this is a guy who wants to be in the NHL too. So we know there's already a log jam, but here's another guy who is brought in for a guy who was not going to play for the Moose again, and probably not for the Jets. So they turned him into a left shooting offensive defensive prospect. I've heard a lot of great things from scouts about his skating ability and offensive instincts. Now we'll see what that turns into. Can he push for work, be a depth guy down the road? Let's see. The biggest thing for him, he's on one last year of an entry-level deal, and then see what happens with him. So Dominic DiVincentis, first time to really watch him in person. Really impressive. Thomas Milic, we know he's had such a winning pedigree. I wouldn't bet against him if I were you. The cool bet lines will probably give you some decent odds for him succeeding. All he's done is win at every level. And, outside of that, just kind of, I like to watch how people interact with players, with the coaches. I think it'll be fun on Saturday. I think there's going to be a bunch of, different elements in the scrimmage component. But yeah, I mean, it's just it's nice. I would say it this way to people. It's a nice way to set your baseline of what you can expect from these players. Let's also not forget, and for folks who just think these guys are coming out of the lab, to borrow LB's words the other day when speaking about Vasilevsky, most of these players haven't been on the ice very much. Their seasons have ended. They've been training, but you really only start ramping up like kind of middle of July and August for the skating portion. And I should also say this, my conversation with Brad Lambert. One thing Jets fans will love to hear, Brad is going to spend the majority of the summer after leaving development camp working out in the Gary Roberts high performance lab. So we know this is an important place for him in his development. The fact that he's committed to doing that the way that, Mark Scheifele and Jacob Trouba and several other players were on their way in or on their way up, that tells you all you need to know about Brad Lambert and what he wants to get accomplished. Now, I think Lambert's going to need to play some time with the Manitoba Moose if he's going to play center, but I love the fact that he's working out with Gary Roberts. He also is a guy, Huss, we know we were in Montreal. He didn't lack confidence last year, but he's a little bit more at ease, I think, having gone through everything that he went through, winning a Western League title, dominating against his peers. Now he's going to come back to the American League level, and I think you have the chance to be dominant and see where things happen from there. Also, one last one, Danny Zhilkin is also a guy who has caught my attention. And because of the late birthday, Huss, I did get down to the bottom of this before the day ended. He is expected to be with the Manitoba Moose and turning pro because He will turn 20 in December. I think that is so valuable on so many different levels for him personally, but also to help ease the transition for Nikita Chibrikov, for Dmitry Kniazev. I think this is so important to have a Russian presence around, a guy who could, we know that Danny has lived in Canada since he was, I think before he was 10 years old. But to have someone who can help, like for young guys, it's important, right? Laine had a couple of young guys around that helped his transition. And now these guys are going to have someone to help them along as they continue to work their way towards, the NHL eventually.
And as far as Lambert goes, and I mean, Lambert had a pretty star-crossed draft year, and we know that he fell from where he was ranked at the beginning of the season, and the Jets were fortunate to be able to pick him at 30th with the Rangers pick.
Yeah.
I couldn't help but thinking, and McGrory particular, just because of his personality, but Barlow as well, having those two guys in, maybe taking some of the spotlight,
Yeah.
I think is actually really good for Brad Lambert as well going into the year. And I think he's also got some, peers and fellow first round picks that come in with, expectations, but really seem to be embracing it as well. Listen, I think that smart money is on all of these players playing elsewhere than Winnipeg. But if you had a gun to your head, who's the most likely player at development camp to see NHL time next season, Ken?
Well, Lambert would be the front runner for sure for me. I don't think it's opening night spot, but for me, he's the guy who would have the best chance of seeing NHL time first. I would also say that Chaz Lucius, depending on his health, could also be pushing. And us, to your point about, that's 4 first round picks who are all pushing at the same time. So we look at the future of the Winnipeg Jets. Can you incorporate 4 at the same time, like 2 seasons from now, or a season like after next season? That's an awfully big number at one time. So there is going to be a pecking order type of situation. Who's ready when, and what role is best suited for these players to pop in to an NHL roster as a full-time player. Could Colby Barlow have an incredible camp and pull a Mark Scheifele and maybe get a few games before going back to junior? It's entirely possible because of his skill set. But I think because he's going to need to work in his skating a little bit more, it's probably unlikely. But he's definitely going to get some preseason action. And then if he shines like Scheifele did, then who knows what's going to happen. But to me, Lambert is probably ahead in the game, in the prospect game right now.